If you are over 60, what I am about to tell you could change your life. Most people realize this only when it is already too late. I am a doctor, and I have seen hundreds of cases where a simple mistake led to serious consequences. I have lived on this earth for many years. I have seen a lot. I have seen people go to doctors and come back with nothing. I have seen others heal themselves with what grew right outside their window and get back on their feet. Not because doctors are bad, no. It is just that there are things humanity knew long before pharmacies existed. Things that have been tested by more than one generation. And today I want to tell you about exactly those things. About folk remedies that were not just passed down by word of mouth, but that science now confirms. Listen carefully. These are not fairy tales or fiction. This is what our grandfathers, great-grandfathers, and their grandfathers used to heal themselves. Let us start with the simplest and most ancient remedy: honey. People have been using honey for medicinal purposes for over 8,000 years. We know this not from hearsay. Cave paintings in Spain, dated to the 6th millennium before our era, depict people collecting honeycombs. The ancient Egyptians used honey to treat wounds 3,500 years ago. This is recorded in the Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical documents in human history. Avicenna, the great Arab physician who lived in the 10th and 11th centuries, described honey as a universal medicine and advised elderly people to consume it daily to maintain health and mental clarity. And here is what is important. Modern science has not simply failed to disprove this knowledge, it has confirmed it. Scientists have proven that honey suppresses the growth of about 60 species of bacteria, including those resistant to antibiotics. Honey contains a special enzyme called glucose oxidase, which releases hydrogen peroxide when it comes into contact with moisture. That is what kills the bacteria. That is why a wound treated with honey heals faster. That is why a throat coated with honey stops hurting. How to use honey correctly? First, for colds and sore throats, dissolve 1 teaspoon of natural dark honey in a glass of warm water, no hotter than 40 degrees Celsius. Hot water destroys the beneficial enzymes. This is important to remember. Drink slowly, in small sips. Do this 3 times a day. Second, for coughs, mix honey with black radish juice in equal proportions. Slice the radish, cover with honey, and leave overnight. In the morning, take 1 tablespoon 3 times a day. This recipe has been used in Russian villages for hundreds of years, and it works. Third, for healing wounds and burns, apply a thin layer of natural honey to the damaged area. Change the dressing twice a day. In New Zealand and Australia, medical-grade Manuka honey is officially used in hospitals for treating chronic wounds and ulcers. One warning: honey is contraindicated for children under 1 year old. It may contain spores of the bacterium Clostridium botulinum, which are dangerous specifically for infants. For adults, this is not a concern. Now let us talk about ginger. Ginger is known all over the world, but not everyone knows how far back its history goes. In India, ginger has been used medicinally for over 5,000 years. It is mentioned in Ayurvedic texts as a universal remedy for nausea, joint pain, and colds. In China, ginger was included in the Pharmacopoeia, the official list of medicinal substances, as early as the 4th century of our era. The Greek physician Dioscorides, who lived in the 1st century of our era, describe ginger as a remedy for improving digestion and warming the stomach. What does science say today? Ginger contains a unique substance called gingerol. It is what gives the root its sharp, burning taste, and it is what has powerful anti-inflammatory effects comparable to some non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. Dozens of randomized clinical trials have confirmed that ginger effectively reduces nausea during morning sickness in pregnancy, seasickness, and after chemotherapy. Ginger lowers blood sugar in type 2 diabetes. This was proven in studies involving people who took 3 grams of ginger powder daily for 8 weeks. It has also been proven that ginger lowers blood pressure, thins the blood, and has antibacterial properties. Here are several recipes I recommend. The first, ginger tea for colds and immunity. Cut a piece of fresh root the size of your thumb, that is about 30 grams. Grate it on a fine grater or slice it into thin pieces. Pour 250 milliliters of just boiled water over it. Let it steep for 10 minutes with a lid on. Add the juice of half a lemon and a teaspoon of honey, but only when the tea has cooled slightly. Drink in the morning on an empty stomach or at the first signs of a cold. The second recipe, a ginger compress for joint pain. Grate fresh root, wrap it in cheesecloth, and apply to the painful area for 20 minutes. You will feel warmth and a burning sensation. This is normal. After the compress, your joints will begin to move more freely. In Japan, samurai used this method after injuries and hard training sessions back in the Middle Ages. The third recipe, ginger with garlic for high blood pressure. Mix 1 tablespoon of freshly grated ginger with 1 teaspoon of grated garlic and 1 tablespoon of honey. Take 1 teaspoon in the morning on an empty stomach in 2-week courses with a 1-week break. An important warning. Ginger is contraindicated for people with stomach ulcers, gallstones, and when body temperature exceeds 38 degrees Celsius. Now, rosehip. This plant is unjustly forgotten in cities, but in villages people remember and value it to this day. The history of rosehip in medicine spans more than 1 millennium. Avicenna, whom I already mentioned, used rosehip oil to treat eye inflammation and gum diseases back in the 10th century. European medieval doctors steeped rosehip petals in wine and used them to treat gastrointestinal diseases. In Russia, rosehip was historically considered a royal medicine. Its berries were so valuable that in the 16th and 17th centuries, special royal servants monitored the harvest, and unauthorized picking could cost you dearly. Why was rosehip so valued? Because it contains 50 times more vitamin C, ascorbic acid, than a lemon. 100 grams of fresh rosehip berries contain between 1,000 and 4,000 milligrams of vitamin C, while the daily requirement for an adult is 60 to 100 milligrams. In addition, rosehip is rich in vitamins A, E, K, B group, as well as iron, magnesium, calcium, and antioxidants. Scientific studies have confirmed its choleretic, diuretic, anti-inflammatory, and immune-stimulating effects. How to brew rosehip correctly? Here is a recipe that preserves all the beneficial substances to the maximum extent. Take 1 tablespoon of dried rosehip berries, about 15 berries. Crush them slightly. You can use a spoon or a rolling pin. This helps the beneficial substances release into the water better. Put them in a thermos and pour 250 milliliters of water at about 80 degrees Celsius. Not boiling water, otherwise some of the vitamin C will be destroyed. Close the thermos and leave to steep for 8 to 12 hours, preferably overnight. In the morning, strain and drink half a glass 30 minutes before meals. The course is 3 weeks, then 1 week off. This infusion is especially beneficial during cold season for anemia, fatigue, and weakness, and to support the function of the liver and kidneys. There are also contraindications. Rosehip is not recommended for people with high stomach acidity, a tendency toward thrombosis, or for those taking anticoagulants, blood-thinning medications. Now let us talk about chamomile. This is perhaps the most accessible and most underestimated medicinal plant in our region. Chamomile, its Latin name is Matricaria chamomilla, was used as medicine in ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome. Hippocrates recommended chamomile for fever. In medieval Europe, chamomile was called the mother of all herbs and was used for stomach diseases, women's ailments, and nervous disorders. In Russia, chamomile was for centuries the main home remedy for everything, from colic in children to rheumatism in the elderly. What does modern science say? More than 120 biologically active compounds have been identified in chamomile. The main one is chamazoline, which forms during distillation and has powerful anti-inflammatory and anti-allergic effects. The flavonoids in chamomile have a calming effect on the nervous system. Apigenin, another compound in chamomile, binds to the same receptors in the brain as sedative drugs, but without side effects or dependency. This was proven in a study at the University of Pennsylvania in 2009. Here are several uses of chamomile that really work. First, for insomnia and nervous tension. Brew 1 tablespoon of dried chamomile flowers in 250 milliliters of boiling water. Steep covered for 10 to 15 minutes. Drink 30 minutes before bed without sugar. After 2 to 3 weeks of regular use, sleep will become deeper and falling asleep will become easier. Second, for stomach pain and spasms, gastritis, and colitis, drink the same infusion warm 3 times a day, 20 minutes before meals in courses of 2 to 3 weeks. Chamomile reduces mucosal inflammation and relieves spasm. Third, for throat and oral inflammation, cool a strong chamomile infusion to room temperature and gargle 5 to 6 times a day. The effect is comparable to chlorhexidine, but without the chemicals. Fourth, for conjunctivitis and tired eyes, make a strong infusion, let it cool, strain through several layers of cheesecloth, and wipe the eyes with cotton pads from the outer corner inward. This relieves irritation and helps with mild inflammation. Now, about nettles. Yes, the very nettles that sting. This plant is unjustly considered a weed, although our ancestors treated it with great respect. Stinging nettle, Latin name Urtica dioica, has been used medicinally since at least the 1st century of our era. Dioscorides described it as a remedy for coughs, kidney diseases, and snake bites. In medieval Europe, nettles were used to burn painful joints. This was called urtication, and it brought relief from rheumatism. In Russia, nettle soup, shchi made from nettles, was eaten in spring not just because it was available, but because people knew, after a long winter, nettles restore strength. What makes nettles so valuable? In terms of iron content, nettles surpass apples and many other foods commonly considered iron sources. They contain chlorophyll, vitamins A, C, K, B group, calcium, magnesium, silicon, and a range of flavonoids. Clinical studies have shown that nettle extract lowers blood cholesterol, reduces inflammation in arthritis, has choleretic effects, and improves kidney function. Here is what you can do with nettles. First, a spring vitamin infusion. In May, when nettles are young, collect the top leaves, pour boiling water over them to remove the sting, and brew like tea. 1 tablespoon per glass of boiling water. Drink half a glass twice a day. Within a week, you will feel a surge of energy. Your skin tone will improve, and fatigue will diminish. This spring treatment was practiced throughout Russia, from the Novgorod to the Siberian provinces. Second, for anemia, weakness, and exhaustion, mix nettle juice in equal parts with beet and carrot juice. Take 2 tablespoons 3 times a day before meals for a course of 1 month. Third, for hair loss, rub nettle broth into the scalp after washing, once every 2 days for a course of 3 weeks. This folk remedy has survived to our day because it works. Now let us talk about garlic. This is perhaps the most studied and most controversial plant in folk medicine. Garlic was used as medicine in all the great ancient civilizations without exception. Egyptian workers building the pyramids received garlic as a mandatory ration for maintaining strength and protection from disease. This is known from artifacts found during excavations. Hippocrates called garlic a heating, diuretic, and laxative remedy and used it for lung diseases. During the First World War, British military doctors used garlic juice to treat wounds. When antiseptics were in short supply, Soviet doctors during the Second World War nicknamed garlic Russian penicillin, precisely because it genuinely helped with infections. The active substance in garlic is allicin. It forms only when garlic is crushed or cut, breaking the cells. It is allicin that has antibacterial and antiviral properties. What is important to understand? Allicin is unstable and is destroyed when heated above 60 degrees Celsius. Therefore, cooked and fried garlic barely works as medicine. Only raw garlic works. What does science say about garlic today? The results are mixed. The antibacterial and antifungal effects of allicin have been confirmed in laboratory conditions, but there is no reliable data showing that eating garlic significantly reduces the frequency of colds in healthy people. However, there is good data in another direction. Several meta-analyses have shown that regular garlic consumption moderately lowers blood pressure in people with hypertension by approximately 8 to 11 millimeters of mercury. This is comparable to the effect of some anti-hypertensive medications in mild form. How to use garlic correctly. The first recipe: garlic oil for the heart and blood vessels. Take 10 cloves of garlic, crush them with the flat side of a knife, and cover with 250 milliliters of unrefined olive oil. Leave in a dark place for 2 weeks. Take 1 teaspoon in the morning on an empty stomach. The second recipe: garlic with lemon and honey. Mince 3 heads of garlic. Mix with the juice of 3 lemons and 300 grams of honey. Take 1 teaspoon twice a day. This remedy is used for the prevention of atherosclerosis and to support immunity. And again, a warning: garlic is contraindicated for stomach ulcers, acute gastritis, liver diseases, and epilepsy. It should also not be eaten before surgical operations. It thins the blood. Now I will tell you about birch buds and birch sap. This is a purely Russian recipe, although birch grows in other countries too. Birch in Russian folk medicine is a whole separate big story. In old herbals from the 17th and 18th centuries, Birch buds were recommended for joint pain, swelling, bladder diseases, and skin conditions. Birch sap was collected in early spring and drunk as a restorative tonic after the long winter. Birch buds contain resins, essential oils, flavonoids, and tannins. A tincture of birch buds has proven diuretic and anti-inflammatory effects. This is recorded in domestic pharmacopoeias. Birch sap contains organic acids, mineral substances, and sugars. Collecting and drinking it in spring is not just a tradition. It is a rational way to replenish the deficiency of vitamins and trace elements that accumulated over winter. How to collect and use them. Buds are collected in early spring before the leaves open, in March or as April, depending on the region. They are dried in the shade with good ventilation. A tincture is made with vodka or alcohol in a ratio of 1 to 5, 1 part buds to 5 parts vodka, and steeped for 3 weeks in a dark place. Take 20 to 30 drops 3 times a day for swelling, joint pain, and diuretic effect. Birch sap is drunk fresh, immediately after collection, at 200 to 300 milliliters per day. The collection season lasts only 2 to 3 weeks a year, which is exactly why it was so prized. Let me tell you about one more remedy that I consider one of the most powerful and yet completely accessible. This is white willow bark decoction. White willow, Latin name Salix alba, is the tree that gave humanity aspirin, not metaphorically, but literally. In the 19th century, German chemist Felix Hoffmann, working at the company Bayer, synthesized acetylsalicylic acid based on salicin, a substance that had been extracted from willow bark for millennia. The ancient Egyptians chewed willow bark for pain and fever 4,000 years ago. Hippocrates recommended a decoction of willow leaves to reduce fever. Willow bark decoction has fever-reducing, pain-relieving, and anti-inflammatory effects. Unlike aspirin, it acts more gently and does not irritate the stomach as much, because in addition to salicin, it contains many other substances that moderate its effect. How to prepare the decoction. Take 1 tablespoon of crushed dried willow bark. You can buy it at a pharmacy or herb shop. Cover with 250 milliliters of cold water. Bring to a boil over low heat and simmer for 10 minutes. Let cool, strain. Drink a half a glass 2 to 3 times a day for headaches, joint pain, and fever from a cold. Do not use this decoction simultaneously with aspirin and other non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. And the last thing I want to tell you about today, plantain, greater plantain, Plantago major, is familiar to everyone from childhood. We pressed it onto cuts and scrapes without even thinking about why. And yet this plant was used as medicine on all inhabited continents, in Europe, Asia, and among the indigenous peoples of America. When Europeans brought plantain to the New World, the Native Americans called it the footprint of the white man, because it grew everywhere the European foot had stepped. Plantain leaves contain aucubin, which has anti-inflammatory effects, mucilaginous substances that coat and protect the mucous membranes, and antibacterial components. Plantain juice is officially included in a number of pharmaceutical preparations for treating coughs and gastritis. Here is how to use plantain. For coughs and bronchitis, brew 1 tablespoon of dried crushed leaves in a glass of boiling water. Steep for 15 minutes. Drink warm 3 times a day, 20 minutes before meals. For gastritis and stomach ulcers, drink the same infusion in courses of 3 to 4 weeks. For fresh wounds, cuts, and scrapes, if you are in a field or forest and have nothing at hand, wash a fresh plantain leaf, crush it until the juice releases, and apply it to the wound. This does not replace treatment with an antiseptic under normal conditions, but as first aid it works. I have told you today about honey and ginger, about rosehip and chamomile, about nettles and garlic, about birch, willow, and plantain. This is not a complete list. It is only a small part of what our ancestors knew and what continues to work today. The main thing I want you to take away from this conversation is not a belief in miracles and not a rejection of doctors. Folk medicine is not a replacement for modern medicine. It is a complement to it. For serious illnesses, see a doctor, but in everyday life, for prevention, for maintaining health, for treating minor ailments, turn first to what nature has given you. This knowledge has been accumulated over millennia. It was tested by millions of people before us, and science increasingly confirms our grandfathers knew what they were doing. If this was useful to you, write in the comments which remedy you already knew and which one was a discovery for you. I read every comment. Until next time.